He had it all: fame, success, and a role on one of the most beloved shows in television history. McLean Stevenson wasn't just part of MASH, he was its heart. As Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, he brought warmth and wit to a show that captured the soul of a generation. But just when everything seemed perfect, Stevenson made a move that stunned the world: he walked away. Fans were devastated, but few knew the truth. Behind the laughter and applause was a storm of career pressure, creative conflict, and a personal gamble that would haunt him for the rest of his life. So why did he leave at the peak of his fame? And did he ever regret it? The answers reveal a side of McLean Stevenson that fans never saw, and a decision that changed everything. McLean Stevenson wasn't just an actor, comedian, or writer, he was a man whose legacy helped shape the golden era of television. But before he made millions laugh and cry as the lovable, scatterbrained Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake on MASH, Stevenson traveled a winding and often uncertain road to stardom. Born Edgar McLean Stevenson Jr. on November 14, 1927, in Normal, Illinois, he came from a family steeped in public service. His grandfather, Adlai Stevenson, served as Vice President of the United States under Grover Cleveland. But while politics ran in the family, McLean's heart was elsewhere. After graduating from Northwestern University, he didn't chase power, he chased performance. And though his rise wasn't immediate, every step, every struggle, led him to a role that would forever cement his place in TV history. At Northwestern University, Stevenson studied theater and shared classrooms with future legends like Charlton Heston. But success didn't come overnight. Before he ever stepped onto a Hollywood soundstage, Stevenson took on a variety of everyday jobs: selling insurance, working in advertising, doing whatever it took to get by. Yet behind the 9-to-5 was a man quietly sharpening his wit and mastering his craft. He slowly carved out a place for himself in regional theater, all while landing small TV parts that taught him the rhythms of comedy and character. In the 1960s, things began to shift. Stevenson started writing for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour and appearing on edgy variety shows like That Was the Week That Was. What many people didn't know at the time was that McLean wasn't just a charismatic performer, he was also a sharp comedic writer. Long before he became a household name, his behind-the-scenes contributions to comedy were already making waves. By the early 1970s, the industry was finally beginning to notice. Stevenson was becoming known as a reliable comedian. He was a guest star on a number of sitcoms and variety shows, and he even hosted The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which was an impressive feat, but it was a different kind of chance that changed his life and cemented his place in television history. In 1972, producers Larry Galbart and Gene Reynolds and Robert Altman's 1970 movie MASH was a surprise hit, combining the absurdities of war with a unique brand of dark humor. When CBS approved the show, the casting team needed actors who could deliver both comedy and vulnerability. Stevenson was cast as Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, the commanding officer of the 477th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Blake wasn't your typical commanding officer, he was forgetful, gentle, and often overwhelmed, but that was exactly what the role called for. Stevenson's subtle and warm performance as Henry Blake made the character more believable, giving humanity to a character who could have easily been a punchline. Unlike the more rigid military archetypes seen in previous war stories, Blake was a man trying to survive the chaos by fishing his wife and staying out of the way. He wasn't heroic in the traditional sense, but he was deeply relatable, and people could relate to him through the jokes and his clumsiness. September 17, 1972. The show got off to a slow start in the ratings, but it quickly picked up steam thanks to great writing and a unique balance of comedy and drama. By the second season, it was clear that the show wasn't just another sitcom, it was groundbreaking television that dealt with serious issues like death, trauma, and the absurdity of war while making people laugh and often cry. McLean Stevenson became one of the show's standout stars thanks to his chemistry with co-stars Alan Alda, Wayne Rogers, and Loretta Swift gave the show a unique rhythm, and viewers loved Blake's awkward charm. Critics, on the other hand, liked how Stevenson added depth to what could have been a one-note role. During his time on the show, MASH was nominated for multiple Emmy Awards, and though Stevenson didn't win, he was a key part of the show's early critical success. The first 3 seasons of the show are widely seen as setting the tone and depth that made it one of the most respected shows in. Stevenson's performance as Henry Blake, the show's lead character, wasn't just funny, it was warm, real, and tinged with quiet sadness, which made the funny parts more interesting. As the show became more popular and Blake became one of the most beloved characters on TV, it seemed like Stevenson was exactly where he was supposed to be. The show was doing well, critics were praising it, and the ratings were steadily going up by the end of season 3. For many actors, this would have been the peak. He had a secure role on a hit show with growing influence and fan support. But what happened next would shock not only fans but also the cast and crew. It wasn't just a plot twist, it became one of the most controversial decisions in TV history, and McLean Stevenson was at the center of it. He had once seemed destined to be a part of MASH's legacy for years to come, but his shocking exit and portrayal of millions of people loved Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake. He was the kind of character who brought warmth and light to an often dark setting. But just as the show was reaching new heights, Stevenson made a shocking decision: he wanted to leave. The timing was strange. MASH was a hit, ratings were going up, and the writing was being praised as groundbreaking. Stevenson was loved by audiences, so why leave it all? The answer, while not clear, was that he wasn't happy with it. The dramatic in the Hollywood sense was deeply personal and based on Stevenson's long-held goals. McLean Stevenson wasn't just an actor, he saw himself as a performer who could lead a show on his own. In 1975, after 3 seasons on the show, he felt trapped. As much as he enjoyed the success of the show, Stevenson was growing restless. He thought he could do more as a solo star, carrying his own series headline and building a television identity beyond the bumbling Henry Blake. In fact, actress Loretta Swift later said that Stevenson was her inspiration. Revealed that Stevenson felt stifled as a supporting actor and wanted to be the show's star. He told her, "I know I will not be in anything as good as this show, but I have to leave and be number one." But this wasn't arrogance, it was the calculated risk of a man who had spent years rising through the ranks of the entertainment industry and didn't want to be typecast or stuck as a second lead. He was ambitious, and in Hollywood, ambition often has consequences, but it didn't happen when he quit MASH. In a vacuum behind the scenes, Stevenson started to feel like his role wasn't as important as Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce, who was becoming the show's main character. McLean, who had hoped for more balanced screen time and character development, could see that if he stayed, he might always come in second place to Alan Alda in comic relief while others carried the emotional weight, and that wasn't enough for him, so he decided not to come back for season 4. What shocked viewers and even the cast was what the show's producers did next. When McLean Stevenson announced his departure, the writers and producers had to figure out how to write off Henry Blake. At the time, characters who left a sitcom were either quietly replaced or sent away with vague explanations. Death, especially sudden and tragic death, was almost unheard of in a comedy series, but MASH was not a normal sitcom, so producer and head writer Larry Galbart and co-producer Henry Blake wouldn't be moved to a different post or reassigned off-screen. Instead, he would die, and not just die, but be killed in action off-screen after the audience thought he had made it home safely. In the last episode of season 3, Henry Blake is given his discharge papers, and the whole camp gathers to say goodbye with tears, cheers, and hugs. It feels like a heartfelt farewell, and for most of the episode, it plays like a typical emotional send-off McLean final. The scenes were filmed with sincerity and a real sense of goodbye, but the real ending was kept a secret from everyone, even the cast. In the last few seconds of the episode, Radar, played by Gary Berghoff, walks into the operating room with a stunned look on his face and a piece of paper in his hand. He says, "Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan, and there were no survivors." The room goes silent, and the cast is shocked because it was filmed to get their original reactions. Fans at home are devastated. People who watched the show were expecting a sad ending, but instead they got a gut punch that felt more like a war casualty than a TV plot twist. Some viewers were outraged, others were heartbroken, and they started writing letters to the show's producers because that wasn't done on TV in the 1970s. Sitcoms were supposed to be safe. What many people didn't know at the time was that not even the cast knew how the episode would end. The last page of the script, which had Radar's announcement, was purposely left out. Creators wanted the reactions to be real, and they were. When Berghoff said the line, the actor's stunned silence wasn't acting, it was genuine disbelief. But this choice wasn't made to be mean to Stevenson. Galbart later explained that it was about realism. In war, people die, even the ones you love. Henry Blake Mash said that the show wasn't just comedy, it was storytelling based in the brutality of conflict, and while it was controversial, it became one of the most. McLean Stevenson's exit from MASH was final. He never came back to the show, and the role of Henry Blake was never filled by someone else. That episode sent shockwave through the audience that changed not only how they saw MASH, but also what television could do. But most people didn't know that the cast and crew had been through their fair share of tensions behind the scenes, including creative differences, jealousy, and a growing imbalance of power that would define the show's legacy. Critics and viewers loved MASH for its great writing and emotional depth, but life behind the camera wasn't always as smooth as it seemed on screen. For all the chemistry that McLean Stevenson had with his co-stars, there were tensions that were sometimes minor and sometimes serious enough to leave a mark. These weren't made public at the time, but later accounts and interviews showed that the beloved show had its share of problems behind the scenes. One of the more famous relationships was on screen. McLean Stevenson and Gary Berghoff, who played Radar O'Reilly, often had a charming, almost parental relationship. Blake's silly confusion went well with Radar's over-the-top competence. But off-screen, their working relationship was more complicated. Stevenson was said to admire Gary's raw talent. Radar had become one of the show's breakout characters, and Gary's performance, especially his subtle comedic timing and emotional vulnerability, gave the role more depth. But admiration didn't always translate to respect. According to reports, Stevenson and Berghoff sometimes found it hard to work together and would argue over small things. Part of the problem was that Berghoff was very focused on his role, often becoming fully immersed in it and paying close attention to every detail. Stevenson, on the other hand, liked a less strict set environment and preferred to be more free-flowing. This difference in style led to misunderstandings and, over time, the tension between the two became more noticeable. They weren't enemies, but they also didn't spend much time together when the cameras were off. In fact, Stevenson once admitted in an interview that he had a love-hate relationship with Gary, saying, "Of the six of us, he did the best job as an actor. He's a brilliant actor, but sometimes I was a problem for him and he was a problem for me." Along with his relationship problems with Stevenson, Gary Berghoff also had a notoriously bad relationship with Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John. According to long-running rumors and reports, Rogers allegedly lost it and threw a chair at Berghoff, which happened during a particularly stressful day on set. The incident wasn't caught on camera, but it became part of the show's history. Rogers, who was known for his laid-back Southern charm, had finally lost it, and details about what happened are still unknown. Even though there was some drama behind the scenes, McLean Stevenson was still a popular figure in Hollywood. He had a gentle personality that many people found refreshing. He wasn't interested in power struggles or egos, he just wanted to perform and make people laugh. His humility helped him keep strong friendships in the industry, even after he left MASH. Co-workers often said he was kind and easy to talk to, and even people who didn't agree with him respected him. When McLean Stevenson quit the hit show MASH, it became even more popular, and now he had to prove that the risk was worth it so he could lead his own successful show and become the star he thought he was meant to be. But after leaving MASH, he made a series of bad decisions that didn't work out the way he had hoped, and what happened to him after he left the show doesn't end well. Leaving MASH, he was sure that he could make something new as a star on his own show and find a way to step out of the ensemble spotlight and take center stage. For someone with Stevenson's comedic instincts and industry experience, this seemed like a safe bet, but television is a different kind of battlefield, and what happened next was a painful reminder of how unforgiving Hollywood could be. His first big project after MASH was the NBC launched The McLean Stevenson Show in 1976 as a family comedy. Stevenson played M. Ferguson, an advertising executive trying to raise his children after the death of his wife. The tone was lighter than MASH and the stakes were much lower. But from the start, something was missing, the writing felt flat, the humor didn't land the way it did in his other work, and most importantly, audiences didn't connect with it. Some viewers tuned in at first to see what Henry Blake was doing next, but the show failed to connect with them. It didn't do well in the ratings and was quietly cancelled after only 12 episodes. Stevenson was very disappointed. He had left a popular show at its peak and was now holding on to a show that disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. He wasn't ready to give up, though. Hollywood often gives second chances, especially to actors with well-known names and faces, so Stevenson tried again with a new project called Hello Larry, which premiered in 1979 and cast Stevenson as Larry. Alder, a radio talk show host raising two teenage daughters in Portland after a divorce. ABC had high hopes for the show. They even linked it to the popular sitcom Different Strokes by crossing over characters and building it into the same TV universe. The network was clearly counting on Stevenson's charm and name recognition to make the show a long-term hit, but Hello Larry quickly became the punchline of a different kind of story. Critics said the writing was bad from the start. Criticized for not being creative, and even though Stevenson tried to carry the material with his natural likability, it just wasn't enough. The show made it through a second season, but it couldn't recover, and Hello Larry was eventually cancelled. Stevenson's second attempt to lead a series was over. By this time, a pattern had emerged. While McLean Stevenson remained a familiar and well-liked face, his post-series projects lacked the magic that made the original series so special. He started making regular guest appearances on different. People still laughed at his comedic timing in shows where he played leading men, but the roles he had hoped for never really came together. The character of Henry Blake loomed over him in every new project, and sadly, none of them were as good as MASH. Stevenson's decision to leave the show as it was had set him on a different career path. Instead of riding the wave of MASH's continued success, he was now chasing it from the outside, hoping that each new series would. In later years, Stevenson was open and honest about his departure from the show. In a famous interview, he said, "When I left the show, the mistake wasn't leaving, the mistake was that I thought everybody in America loved McLean Stevenson. That wasn't the case, everybody loved Henry Blake. So if you go and do the McLean Stevenson show, nobody cares about McLean Stevenson." He didn't say this with anger, but there was a clear sense of reflection in his voice that he didn't deny it. He admitted that leaving a popular show for more control, attention, and a bigger role was probably a mistake, but he kept a sense of humor about his journey and sometimes made jokes about his bad decisions and the cancellation of his later projects. Stevenson never stopped working, but his big comeback never came. He was still well known and loved as Henry Blake, but as the years went by, his roles got smaller. Stevenson never blamed anyone else for how things turned out, but in his later years he would have more personal problems, not just with his career but also with his health, getting older, and the small fights that never make the news. Stevenson's later years and health problems. McLean Stevenson was known for his friendly personality, quick wit, and ability to make almost any situation funny. But the years after he left MASH were not always so happy. Friends and co-workers started to notice small changes in him. He was still friendly and upbeat in public, but the confidence that drove him to leave MASH had given way to something more introspective. Regret crept in and weighed on him in quiet, persistent ways. In multiple interviews, Stevenson didn't try to hide his disappointment. He admitted that leaving the show had been a risk that didn't pay off the way he had hoped. It was rare to see that kind of honesty in Hollywood, especially from a star. Stevenson never pretended he owned his decisions, even when they hurt him more than they helped him. Professionally, the never-ending cycle of cancelled shows, guest spots, and unfinished projects made him more than just tired. He kept showing up and working, but there was a heaviness behind the smile. For a performer who used to bring so much joy to others, not being able to keep up his career momentum became more than just a professional issue, it became a personal one. Behind the scenes, Stevenson was dealing with something even worse in his later years. though it was never widely reported. McLean Stevenson reportedly started battling bladder cancer. Stevenson kept his illness a secret, but insider reports said he had surgery for the disease. There were hopes for recovery, but the experience changed his life. He lost energy and stopped showing up as often. Cancer is a cruel enemy, but Stevenson handled it the same way he had dealt with setbacks in his career, with quiet strength. He didn't make his illness a part of who he was or try to be defined by it, but it took a toll. Fighting cancer is a full-time job that tests the body and the spirit, and for someone who had already been through years of professional disappointment, it added another layer of stress. On February 15, 1996, while still in recovery, McLean Stevenson died of a sudden heart attack at Enino-Tarzana Regional Medical Center in Los Angeles. The news shocked fans. After his death, McLean Stevenson's co-stars, fans, and colleagues in the entertainment industry paid him warm, heartfelt tributes that were tinged with nostalgia. They remembered him as kind, generous, and incredibly talented, but there was another question that didn't have a clear answer: did McLean Stevenson's post-MASH problems contribute to his health decline? It's not an easy question to ask, and it's not an easy answer to give, but in Hollywood, the lines between emotional and physical health are often blurred. Stress, disappointment, and regret don't always show up on a chart, but they leave their mark. Stevenson spent 20 years trying to get back something he had left behind, and while he did it with humor and humility, it was hard. People who watched him go from being at the top of the ratings to the quiet exits of cancelled sitcoms can't help but wonder if the industry took more from him than it gave him in those last few years. In the end, McLean Stevenson's later life was marked by a kind of quiet dignity. He just kept going and showing up, even when things got tough. When the rewards were fewer and the street turned into tougher, he had once been on the middle of one of the maximum liked indicates in television history, and even as he may also have spent the rest of his career seeking to recapture that lightning, he in no way misplaced the respect of folks who worked with him or the affection of the enthusiasts who in no way forgot Henry Blake. But the question is, did McLean Stevenson absolutely make a mistake when he left MASH, or was he just one of many who believed perhaps too strongly that TV might supply him any other shot? Did Stevenson make a mistake searching again on McLean Stevenson's lifestyles and profession? The question that unavoidably lingers is, did he make a mistake through leaving MASH, or become his story extra complex than a single career path long gone? Incorrect. The man changed into in no way one-dimensional. He was born into an outstanding Illinois political-owned family. He changed into associated with Adlai Stevenson, too, the previous governor of Illinois and a time unsuccessful presidential candidate. This supposed that McLean Stevenson had early publicity to the political global. If lifestyles had long gone otherwise, he may have observed a path into public provider diplomacy or political observation. He changed into sharp, articulate, and understood the mechanics of energy and persona. However, Hollywood called louder, and he followed that call with optimism, not conceitedness, and he wasn't without different competencies. Stevenson had a unique voice and fun that humans remembered. That snicker have become a form of trademark at some point of his time on MASH. In every other version of his profession he would possibly have pivoted to voice performing. Those avenues have been open, and within the hastily expanding media panorama of the 80s and 90s there have been locations he may want to have thrived, but perhaps he become too tied to the idea of the front, dealing with stardom, too invested in recreating the sitcom achievement that had come so speedy. The primary time within the twilight of his career, the jobs grew smaller, quieter. His very last television appearances came in indicates like The Love Boat and Prognosis, Homicide, which have been guest spots that supplied quick glimpses of the attraction that after made him a household call. However, there was no grand comeback, no overdue profession reinvention. His exit from the highlight changed into gentle, nearly unnoticeable. The industry moved on, and he did too, but at the same time as his later projects may additionally have dwindled. One issue never did. Henry Blake. A long time after Stephenson's death, his portrayal of Colonel Henry Blake stays one of the maximum liked characters in television history, so become leaving the show a mistake nicely in terms of profession trajectory. Possibly Stevenson himself admitted as a lot in later interviews, but in a broader sense perhaps no longer. He followed his instincts. He took a chance because he believed in himself, and to many that's now not failure, it's braveness. However, what do you observe? Did McLean Stevenson make a mistake by using leaving MSH? Inform us within the remarks section under. In case you loved this video, don't forget to click on the following video to your display, like this video, and join our channel for extra updates.